Let's take a look at our model. Models in Mongoose is the interface you use to talk to and work with MongoDB collections. To define a model, you start off with a schema. Mongoose is designed all around schemas. And the reason for this is that while MongoDB may not care about and validate any sort of schema in your documents within a collection, our applications often care very much about the data that we're sending and storing. So, using a schema, a Mongoose schema, we pass an object that is the definition for our documents for the given collection. Now, this is fairly easy. We just execute the schema method, the schema constructor actually, of the Mongoose module. We can put new in front of this if you feel like it. It's optional. And so what we're going to do here is define a few things. Now, we wouldn't normally need to define an underscore ID, but we are not going to use the default object ID type for our IDs on our user collection. What we want to do instead is use the email address that the users are submitting as the unique identifier for our users. So instead of just using the object ID, we are going to specify the type as a string, and we're going to do something additional. We want to validate that the string being passed in is indeed an email address. So we can declare that here with a special validation rule and give it a function which we've required here. And that's just typical email validation, regular expression wrapped in a function. Okay, so we can also store the user's first and last name as strings. We want to make sure that those are strings. We're also going to be storing the salt and hash, which is used when we create the user and they submit us a password. We're going to generate a random salt and then hash that password and salt together to produce the hash. And we'll use this to validate that the password the user submits again later when they log back in is indeed the same password without having to store the password ourselves in plain text. The last thing we want to add to our user documents is a created date. So we'll specify that type as a date here. And we don't always want to have to set properties every time we create a document. And in this case, every document should have a created date. So we will set the default value for a user document to the current date. So whenever we create a user, it'll have a created date set to the current date. And then we pass our schema definition into our mongoose.model method. We give that model a name. In this case, it's user. And Mongoose does the rest for us. We didn't set any special indexing up here because we're going to be querying by ID. But if we did, say, want to query by the created date, we could set an index up this way. And in this case, basic, straightforward case, when you declare the model and connect to MongoDB, indexes are created for you automatically. So something to keep in mind. Go ahead and read up more about how you declare indexes in Mongoose on mongoosejs.com if you're curious. So that's our user model. Next up, we're going to take a peek at the adjustments we made to our middleware.